The rain was coming down in heavy sheets, soaking through my coat, clinging to my hair, dripping down my face like the tears I didn't have the strength to wipe away anymore. My hand gripped the small, battered suitcase so tightly that my knuckles had turned white. It wasn't even packed properly, just whatever I could grab in the few minutes I had before the door slammed behind me. I thought betrayal was something you saw in movies, something that happened to other people. Not me. Not us. Until my own husband looked at me with eyes I didn't recognize, eyes full of hatred, disgust, and something even colder than anger. 8 years of marriage. 8 years of believing we were building a life together. Daniel and I met when I was 25, just starting my career as a marketing coordinator, and he was this charming, ambitious man who made me feel like the only woman in the world. We got married 3 years later, and before I knew it, we were parents. Liam came first, my sweet, quiet boy with a love for puzzles, and then Sophie, my wild little sunshine with a laugh that could melt ice. We weren't perfect, but we were happy, at least, I thought we were. It started subtly. Daniel became more withdrawn, distracted. He spent more nights working late, his phone always glued to his hand. I chalked it up to stress. His job in finance was demanding, and the economy wasn't great. But then the look started. Long, hard stares when I walked into the room. Questions that didn't make sense, where I was, who I talked to, why Sophie didn't have his exact shade of brown eyes. I laughed it off. I told myself I was imagining things, that every marriage had rough patches. We'd been through tough times before, financial scares, postpartum struggles, even a miscarriage that nearly broke me. But we'd always made it through together. That was the promise we made on our wedding day, through sickness and health, through the storms and the sunshine. But this storm was different. Tonight, the final blow came without warning. No raised voices, no fight leading up to it, just a cold, calculated look in his eyes and words that ripped through me like glass. I didn't know what I had done. I didn't know why my husband, the man who once kissed my tears away, was now the one causing them. I didn't know that the man I trusted the most was planning my humiliation. If you'd asked me a year ago what happiness looked like, I would have pointed to our dinner table. Liam chattering about his day at school, Sophie trying to sneak extra mashed potatoes when she thought no one was looking, and Daniel sitting across from me with that little smirk he had when something amused him but he didn't want to laugh out loud. We had our routines. Mornings were chaos, me rushing to get the kids dressed while Daniel made coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Evenings were calmer. We'd eat together, talk about our days, then Daniel would take Liam outside for soccer practice while I bathed Sophie and read her a bedtime story. He was proud to be a dad. You could see it in the way his chest puffed up at Liam's first goal, or how he'd tear up during Sophie's preschool performances. Every birthday, he went all out. Balloons, decorations, cakes so big they could feed an army. He never missed a single celebration. I used to joke that he loved party planning more than I did. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. At first, it was small. He started asking oddly specific questions about my day, where exactly I'd gone after work, who I'd talked to, why it took me 20 minutes to get home instead of 15. Then I noticed his phone habits. He was always checking something, typing quickly before locking it like he didn't want me to see. I brushed it off. Finance was a stressful world, and I figured he was under pressure. I told myself not to make it about me. But there were moments that made my stomach knot. Like the evening we were all in the living room, Sophie curled up on my lap while Daniel was watching her closely. Out of nowhere, he said, "She doesn't have my eyes." His tone wasn't playful, it was sharp, clipped, almost like an accusation. I laughed, trying to keep things light. Well, maybe she got my side of the family. Genetics can be funny. But he didn't laugh back. He just stared for a moment, then turned away. Looking back now, I can see it. The way the warmth started leaking out of our home, replaced by suspicion that I didn't understand. But at the time, I told myself it was nothing. That marriages went through seasons, and this was just a colder one. If I had known what he was doing behind my back, I would have been the one to leave first. It was a Tuesday night, quiet, ordinary, the kind of evening where the only sounds were the dishwasher humming and the faint laughter of a sitcom playing in the background. Liam and Sophie had just gone to bed, and I was folding laundry in the bedroom when Daniel's voice cut through the air. "Emma." "Living room." "Now." Something about his tone made my stomach clench. It wasn't anger, it was colder than that. When I stepped into the living room, he was sitting stiffly on the couch, 2 large envelopes in his lap. His face was unreadable, but his jaw was tight, his eyes locked on me like a predator sizing up prey. He didn't waste time. Without a word, he tossed the envelopes onto the coffee table. "Open them," he said. I frowned, reaching for the first one. The paper inside was official looking, covered in columns and numbers. My eyes scanned the heading, DNA paternity test results, and my heart lurched. "What is this?" I asked, my voice trembling. Daniel's expression didn't change. "They're not mine." "Neither of them." It took me a moment to even process the words. "What? That's insane." "They're your kids, Daniel." "What are you talking about?" His voice was like ice. "Don't lie to me." I tested Liam and Sophie. Twice. Secretly. Both times, the results were the same. I shook my head, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the paper. "Daniel, I have never, ever, cheated on you. I swear to God." "Those tests have to be wrong." "They're not wrong," he cut in sharply. "You've been lying to me for years. Playing house while making me raise another man's kids." My chest felt like it was caving in. "No. You know me. You know I would never." "Pack your things." I just stared at him, stunned. "What?" He stood up, grabbed a small duffel bag from beside the couch, and threw it toward me. "Take what you can carry and get out. Tonight." I looked toward the hallway, where our children were sleeping peacefully, unaware their whole world was shattering. "Daniel, please, let's talk about this in the morning." "The kids, they're not my kids." His voice was final, sharp enough to slice through whatever hope I had left. The tears came fast then, hot, blinding. I tried to plead, to reason, but he wouldn't hear it. Every word out of my mouth bounced off a wall I didn't know he had built. When I finally walked toward the door, clutching the half-filled bag, I turned back one last time. "You're wrong, Daniel. I swear to you, you're wrong." He didn't reply. The door slammed so hard behind me, the sound echoed in my bones. My sister, Claire, opened her front door at midnight to find me standing there, soaked through, clutching a bag like it was the only thing keeping me together. She didn't ask questions, she just pulled me inside, wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, and let me cry until I couldn't breathe. The next few days blurred into each other. I stayed in her guest room, barely eating, barely sleeping. Every time my phone buzzed, I prayed it would be Daniel saying he'd made a mistake. But it never was. Instead, it was whispers from neighbors, people I thought were friends, asking if it was true, if the kids weren't his. Gossip moves fast in small communities. By the end of the week, I could feel the stares even when I wasn't looking. The worst part wasn't the humiliation, it was the silence. Daniel refused to take my calls, refused to let me see Liam and Sophie. He didn't care that they were asking for me. My babies, ripped away without warning, all because of something I didn't even understand. One night, lying awake in the dark, I found myself replaying the births in my head. Liam's delivery had been long but straightforward. Sophie's had been different. Complicated. I remembered nurses rushing around, a brief moment where she was taken away before I even got to hold her. At the time, they said it was standard procedure. But now, the thought took root and refused to let go. The next morning, I called the hospital. My voice shook as I explained who I was, asked for birth records. There was a pause on the other end, too long to be nothing. Finally, the nurse said quietly, "There was an incident. A baby mix-up scare in the nursery. But it was resolved. The right infants went home with the right parents." I sat there in silence, gripping the phone. "Are you sure?" "Yes, ma'am. The matter was documented and closed years ago." But there was a hesitation in her voice that told me even she wasn't certain. When I hung up, something shifted inside me. I'd been sitting here drowning in shame, letting Daniel's accusations define me. That stopped now. If there was one thing I knew, it was that I was their mother. And I was going to prove it, no matter what it took. The next day, I booked my own DNA tests. This time, I'd get the truth. 2 weeks later, the envelope arrived. I sat at my sister's kitchen table, the air thick with anticipation. Claire hovered beside me, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder as I tore it open. My eyes locked on the words that mattered most. Conclusion: subject is the biological mother of both children. Subject is not related biologically to presumed father. I read it again. And again. The truth settled in, cold and heavy. They were mine, my flesh, my blood, but Daniel wasn't their father. For a long moment, I just stared at the paper, my mind spinning. And then the memories came rushing back, the years of trying to conceive, the endless doctor visits, the IVF treatments. We trusted that clinic with our future. A sickening realization hit me. Somewhere in that process, something had gone horribly, unforgivably wrong. I called the hospital that had handled our IVF and demanded an appointment with their director. When I arrived, I didn't bother with pleasantries. I slapped the DNA report on the table. "Explain this," I said, my voice shaking, not with fear, but with rage. The director's face paled. Papers shuffled. Eventually, he admitted what I already suspected: there had been a clerical and procedural error, twice. Daniel's sperm sample had never been used. Instead, an anonymous donors had been mistakenly substituted in both of our cycles. They had known about possible irregularities in the lab's records but claimed they had no way to confirm without disrupting our lives. Disrupting our lives. I nearly shouted. "You think destroying my marriage and turning my children's lives upside down is less disruptive than telling the truth?" They tried to placate me, offering apologies, internal investigation reports, and vague assurances. I told them they'd hear from my lawyer. And they did. A week later, Daniel was served with documents, not from me directly, but from my attorney. He called me for the first time since that night. His voice was smaller than I remembered. I didn't know," he said. "No," I replied coldly. "You didn't ask. You tested them in secret, threw me out of my own home, took my children away, all without giving me a chance to speak." He was silent for a long moment before whispering, "They're not mine, Emma." "They're not yours biologically," I said, my voice steady, "but they were yours in every other way. And you threw that away." I hung up before he could respond. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than pain. I felt clarity. Daniel had destroyed us with his distrust, but now he'd have to live knowing the truth, that his cruelty had been built on a lie, and the only one to blame was himself. The settlement came 3 months later. The hospital, desperate to avoid the media scandal my lawyer threatened, agreed to a substantial payout, enough to give me and the kids a fresh start. It didn't erase what happened, but it gave me the power to choose what came next. Daniel called the day after he heard about the settlement. His voice was softer, tentative, the arrogance I once knew completely gone. Emma. I'm sorry, he said. I was wrong. I shouldn't have handled it the way I did. He broke off, his voice cracking. I still love them. And I still love you. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting his words hang in the air. You didn't just doubt me, Daniel, I said quietly. You threw me out without a word. You kept my children from me. You made me feel like I was nothing. I panicked, he whispered. You thought the worst of me, I cut in. And that's who you are now. Not a man who made a mistake, but a man who chose cruelty over conversation. There was a long pause before he asked, can we try again? For the kids. No, I said simply. When the custody hearing came, the judge listened to the evidence, how Daniel had kept me from the children without legal grounds, how he'd acted without proof, and how the truth eventually came out. I was awarded primary custody. Daniel was granted visitation, supervised. Moving into our new home was bittersweet. The walls were bare at first, but the laughter of Liam and Sophie filled the rooms quickly. I decorated their bedrooms exactly how they liked them, space rockets for Liam, fairy lights for Sophie. We were building something new, something ours. Daniel came by for his supervised visits, and I could see the regret in his eyes every time Sophie ran to me instead of him, every time Liam told me about his day before he even glanced at his father. But I didn't feel pity. Revenge wasn't about making him suffer, it was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and the love of my children. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, I sat on the porch and thought about everything that had happened. The rain was falling again, soft this time, almost cleansing. Sometimes betrayal isn't about what's true, it's about who they become when they think it's true. And Daniel had shown me exactly who he was. So, I'll ask you, if someone you loved doubted you without proof, would you forgive them?